Hi everyone, my name is Per Asbos and I'm joined with Henrik Karlström to talk about a recent report about institutional open access publishing in Norway. The background for our talk is that the institutional platforms have been established in various institutions in Norway since the early 2000s. So we have now almost a 20-year history. But how do these platforms actually work, and what are the prospects for the future? With these thoughts in mind, a report was commissioned by Universities Norway, and we got the task to look at the status and prospects for such institutional journal publishing. So the working group consists of people from various institutions that you can see here on the slide. The full report is in Norwegian, unfortunately, but we'll try to explain the gist of it in English. First of all, the publishing landscape in this country is split between commercial publishers and institutional publishers. As of 2020, the commercial publishers still had a majority of their journals are published with some sort of subscription, but 25 journals actually are fully OA. The institutional publishers, in contrast, they have far more journals that are OA. So we have a system in Norway with public money that supports Diamond Open Access for 25 journals that are at 3 different commercial publishers. Whereas the institutional publishers are really small, they host between 2 and 15 accredited peer-reviewed open access journals each. So here are 2 examples. Hard to tell from this picture what is produced by a commercial publishing house and what is provided by an institutional publisher. As you can see, the picture to the left is a Norwegian society journal. It is fully OA. And as it happens, it is published by a commercial publisher, whereas Viking to the right is another society journal published by one of the institutions in Norway. So this fund that I just mentioned that are exclusively for important journals in the Norwegian language that are within the humanities and social sciences. The 3 publishing houses are as follows: Universitetsforlaget, Cappelen Damm, Novus Forlag. So these are traditional commercial publishing houses that are service providers. The institutional publishing service providers are here to the right. So what about this form of Diamond Open Access that is thanks to the institutions themselves? How does this work? Currently, there are a total of 71 peer-reviewed open access journals published by the institutions themselves. Hardly any of these journals use APCs. So this is the public money from the government-funded institutions themselves that support these services. Generally, there is a higher linguistic and disciplinary diversity within the institutionally published journals in Norway. They are not only within humanities and social sciences, but a wider spectrum. We have a full data set that you can look at if you're interested. But now I ask you, Henrik, to tell us more about some challenges.
Right, so Per gave us an overview of the existing landscape, but obviously part of the reason why this report was commissioned in the first place is that there are some challenges with how the current system works. So one of them is that, as Per mentioned, most of the institutional publishers are really quite small, and the support organizations that underlie these publishing activities are also quite small. They're usually staffed by people who have other working tasks in addition to running a publishing service. So there's a lot of part-time support being given. In addition, you have a quite irregular maintenance structure for software and infrastructure on the technical side. There are also questions about the quality control. So a lot of the content that is being produced for these publications is also produced at the same institution that hosts the publications. So although this is not necessarily a problem in itself, questions can be raised whether there is sufficient quality control for some of these publication channels. There is also a possible problem with lack of compliance with some government mandated accessibility measures and also funder mandates that we see are on the rise from especially funders related to open access publishing, such as Planes, for example, requires higher technical compliance than many of the current OJS-based open access publishers are able to provide in such a small support organization. So in the report, we go over some possible future scenarios. And one of them obviously is to start with the usual business as usual scenario, which has the pro of having a cost structure and a support structure that is known to the institutions that run the current publishing services. But the problems are also already known, and these are some of the problems that I mentioned in the previous slide. Another possible scenario could be to hire external services providers and then sort of act as a coordinator of this hiring process. And some of the pros of this is that it's a highly flexible solution. And because you are making use of professional publishing services, you can expect a high service quality. However, you might have issues with cost control, and there are also some questions about the delineation against the existing commercial publishing structure. A third scenario that we were asked to look at was the possibility of a common Nordic platform. Norway is not alone in having many institutional open access publishers, and similar questions have been raised in our neighboring countries. So you could envision having a common Nordic publishing platform, and the obvious strength of this would be having a large scale and unlocking economies of scale. But it would also require quite a lot of coordination, not just internally in a country, but between across borders and institutional contexts. And you would also probably have an even quite costly initial consolidation period where getting all the different technical systems that are out there to merged into one could carry quite a lot of costs and some transaction problems, basically. The last scenario that we discuss is one of a national institutional publishing platform. And we think that this would deliver some of the same pros as a common Nordic platform, meaning you could unlock some economies of scale and you could get some standardization of services. But one possible problem is the internal reorganization of institutional publishing support, where many of the people who today have a part-time commitment to open access publishing would maybe not necessarily find an easy way to attach to a common national platform in such a sense. But our recommendation still remains to develop a national institutional publishing service for Norway. And we think, and we recommend this because we believe it is a necessity to be able to guarantee quality of service in the future, particularly when it comes to the compliance with universal accessibility laws and these new funder mandates around technical and metadata structures that are demanded by, among others, the Coalition S. One other pro that I haven't mentioned is that we believe it possibly increases the scope of institutional publishing in Norway, possibly unlocking a way for smaller institutions that do not currently have an institutional publishing service to latch onto a national platform and be able to launch their own publishing services through the national platform that they would not consider creating today. We believe it would be able to deliver consistent and coordinated support for publishing rather than a sort of a patchwork part-time effort, because you will be able to have dedicated positions in a centralized system for technical and other support measures. But we also, obviously, this will require centralized hosting, And we will need to find a model for the redirection of the current resources being spent internally at an institution into a national system. And there might be some question over how this can be coordinated in the best possible way.
That's all. So thank you for your attention, and we look forward to hear your questions and thoughts on this idea.